Let's be clear about what the president is responding to, because many in this room want to talk about the president's response, but not what brought the president to respond.
Remember when President Trump straight up told us he was going to hell?
I think I'm not maybe heaven bound.
But he thinks that after this week, God is back on board.
The joke lasted only 42 seconds, but the fallout from it is still unfolding. A single Saturday Night Live monologue suddenly pushed Donald Trump and Karoline Leavitt into the center of attention, and by the end of the night, the internet was no longer laughing. Screenshots began resurfacing. Older statements were replayed across social media, and the reaction that followed was not calm or confident, it was furious. The real question is what exactly the host said that triggered such a wave of damage control, because whatever that moment was, it clearly struck a nerve.
I think it's frankly ridiculous that anyone in this room would even suggest that President Trump is doing anything for his own benefit. He left a life of luxury and a life of running a very successful real estate empire.
Search the county election hub in Georgia looking for ballots to back up President Trump's false claim that the 2020 election was rigged. Jesus, man, let it go. I mean, even Hitler stopped trying to get into art school at some point.
The entire political strategy can unravel the moment someone gathers your greatest public statements and plays them one after another without the dramatic soundtrack. That is essentially what happened when Donald Trump and Karoline Leavitt found themselves at the center of a carefully constructed comedic breakdown built almost entirely from their own words, arranged with precise timing.
Celebrating his first year in office, President Trump said that God was very proud of the job he's doing as president. Trump added that God was probably looking up at us right now, smiling from horn to hoof.
The backlash was not triggered by the exposure of a secret document or some hidden scandal. It came from something far simpler and far more dangerous: pattern recognition, especially when the audience already knows the source material.
President Trump said that he will only negotiate with Democrats when they agree to reopen the government, adding that he will not be extorted. Except that one time he famously got extorted by that mattress actress Stormy Daniels.
Colin Jost handled the moment the way a prosecutor might deliver a closing argument, except instead of quoting legal codes, he relied on public comments and viral clips that have circulated online for years. Jost did not exaggerate Trump's long history of calling the media corrupt, while also dominating nearly every news cycle he enters. Instead, he reframed the contradiction in a way that made it impossible to overlook, suggesting that declaring war on the spotlight while racing toward it looks less like strategy and more like performance art. The focus then shifted toward Karoline Leavitt, who has built her reputation as a rapid response defender for many of Trump's most controversial moments. She has challenged reporters, dismissed negative coverage as partisan, and confidently argued that critics invent narratives out of nothing. The comedy suggested that if narratives are being created, they are at least built using high-definition footage provided by the campaign itself. The roast treated her media appearances as if they were chapters in a guidebook about expressing outrage at everything, while never missing the chance to be in front of a camera.
President Trump has been inviting world leaders to join his board of peace or be crushed by his council of destruction. Trump's board of peace consists of countries such as Russia and Saudi Arabia, which is like if Law & Order SVU starred Diddy.
Meanwhile, Michael Che leaned into that same theme with a calm delivery that made the punchlines land even harder. Che pointed out how every legal development surrounding Trump tends to be framed by allies as either a witch hunt or a badge of honor, depending on the latest polling numbers. He joked that the messaging strategy sometimes resembles a streaming service offering only one genre, political persecution drama, renewed season after season, whether viewers ask for it or not. Trump's long-running feud with the comedy show provided the perfect background for the segment. During his presidency, he repeatedly criticized the program's portrayals of him and accused it of bias, despite having hosted the show himself during the 2016 campaign. That history gave the jokes an extra layer of irony because complaining about a comedy program mocking you while benefiting from the attention it creates is a paradox that practically writes its own punchline. Jost returned to the larger theme of grievance as branding, noting that Trump's political movement often treats criticism as proof of righteousness. The suggestion was that if everyone seems to be against you, it can be framed as confirmation that you must be doing something right, a compelling story until comedians begin listing the moments where the outrage appeared less principled and more predictable. By stacking those examples rapidly one after another, the repetition itself became the punchline.
President Trump made hundreds of posts on Truth Social, including conspiracy theories, attacks on Democrats, and even a video of his cameo in Home Alone 2, which I hadn't seen in a while, and I have to say, the dialogue, it hits different now. Check it out.
Excuse me, where's Jeffrey Epstein?
Karoline Leavitt's role within Trump's political circle became a central element of the satire because she represents a generational update to a familiar message. She is younger, media-savvy, and quick in interviews, yet the themes she defends closely mirror Trump's long-standing approach. Che framed this dynamic as rebranding without renovation, implying that replacing the spokesperson does not change the structure if the foundation underneath remains exactly the same. Trump's past as a reality television star on The Apprentice deepens the irony even further. A figure who built a national brand through televised confrontation now appears irritated when confrontation arrives packaged as satire. The comedic framing suggested that when politics begins to resemble entertainment, it cannot be surprised when entertainment responds using the same style. Jost emphasized how often Trump and his allies criticize major media outlets as dishonest, while still appearing eagerly on friendly networks to spread their message. The contrast between condemning the media and using it at the same time became a recurring theme, and the humor came from presenting both sides of that relationship as inseparable. The segment suggested that attacking the referee while continuing to play the game is not rebellion, it is choreography.
And this judge, Judge Boasberg, is a Democrat activist. He was appointed by Barack Obama. His wife has donated more than $10,000 to Democrats, and he has consistently shown his disdain for this president and his policies, and it's unacceptable.
You took me right where I wanted to go about the idea that these people are all foreign terrorists, but Judge Boasberg was originally appointed by George W. Bush and then elevated by Barack Obama. I just feel like I should clear that up.
Karoline Leavitt's media appearances defending Trump during legal challenges provided even more material for the satire. She has frequently described investigations as politically motivated and portrayed critics as desperate to derail a larger movement. Che reframed that language as a reflex, joking that if gravity itself questioned the campaign, it would probably be accused of bias as well. The exaggeration worked because it felt close enough to reality to be believable. The backlash that followed the segment seemed almost scripted. Trump allies quickly criticized the show as irrelevant and disconnected from ordinary voters, which is an unusual strategy because responding publicly often helps the clip travel even further online. Jost subtly highlighted this dynamic by implying that outrage within the Trump universe sometimes works like rocket fuel, pushing the very stories it claims to oppose even higher. Che then returned to Leavitt, pointing out that her confident interviews project unwavering certainty. The satire suggested that certainty can appear more fragile when placed beside older footage that seems to contradict it. By pairing bold statements with archived comments, the comedy created tension without needing to directly argue the point.
The circumstances surrounding the death of Jeffrey Epstein. According to the report, this systematic review revealed no incriminating client list. So what happened to the Epstein client list that the Attorney General said she had on her desk?
Well, I think if you go back and look at what the Attorney General said in that interview, which was on your network, on Fox News.
I've got the quote.
Go ahead.
John Roberts said, DOJ may be releasing the list of Jeffrey Epstein's clients. Will that really happen? And she said,
the broader theme that emerged was predictability. Trump's political identity often centers on disruption and dominance, yet the response cycle to criticism has become surprisingly consistent. A critique appears, denunciation follows, supporters rally, and media coverage multiplies. Jost treated that pattern like the steady tick of a metronome, suggesting that even the outrage now follows a familiar rhythm. Leavitt often argues that cultural institutions are biased against conservative voices, and Che reframed that claim by joking that if every institution you dislike is corrupt, the list will eventually include anyone holding a microphone. The humor worked because it raised a serious question about how long a strategy built entirely on external blame can last. Trump's relationship with late-night comedy has always been combative. During his presidency, he even suggested that equal time rules should apply to shows that mock him, a proposal that quickly ran into constitutional limits. Jost referenced that tension by implying that expecting fairness from satire misunderstands the genre, because comedy answers to timing rather than political committees. As the segment continued, Karoline Leavitt was portrayed less as a villain and more as a symbol of a communication strategy built on constant confrontation.
So much time stalking Greenland like an absolute psycho. He's basically become a guy on a dating app. He's like, hey, Greenland, you look so good. And Greenland's like, haha, thanks. And Trump's like, seriously, I need you. I'd literally give $700 billion to be with you.
At one point, Che suggested that the louder the denunciation becomes, the more it strengthens the caricature being mocked. In that sense, the reaction itself begins to function as part of the joke, rather than a genuine rebuttal. The brilliance of the roast came from its reliance on documented behavior rather than speculation. Trump's public remarks, Leavitt's interviews, and the campaign's messaging are available to anyone online. The comedians simply curated the highlights and arranged them into a narrative that felt coherent. Che closed the thematic circle by suggesting that in a time when politics and entertainment constantly overlap, becoming the subject of parody is not necessarily a scandal, but almost a milestone. The more prominent a figure becomes in national conversation, the more inevitable satire becomes. If Trump's political brand depends on commanding attention, then appearing as a recurring character in comedy sketches becomes less an attack and more an inevitable side effect. In the aftermath, no policies changed and no campaigns ended. Trump continued campaigning, Leavitt continued defending him, and the news cycle moved forward. Yet the sting lingered because the jokes did not invent flaws, they highlighted patterns. Che moved between humor and observation so smoothly that the criticism felt embedded within the laughter.
This week, Trump declared himself the acting president of Venezuela. By next week, he will be the interim Ayatollah of Iran, and then on to his ultimate goal, head reindeer of Greenland. In fact, a congressman has introduced a bill to make Greenland the 51st state. Meanwhile, Puerto Rico's like, wow, okay.
Ultimately, what the segment revealed was not a hidden vault of secrets, but a rhythm of reaction that has become so familiar it almost feels ritualistic. When outrage is deployed against every critic, including comedians, it risks losing its shock value. The sharpest insight of the segment was that the real vulnerability might not be any single controversy, but the predictability of the response itself. In a political environment obsessed with dominance, predictability becomes the one weakness satire rarely overlooks. What made the moment even more explosive was its timing during a tense election cycle where every joke exists inside a high-stakes narrative battlefield. The Trump campaign has framed itself as embattled yet unstoppable, presenting legal scrutiny and media criticism as evidence of an existential struggle. When satire enters that storyline and treats it like a recurring television plot, it does more than mock the characters, it questions the strength of the script itself. Jost subtly pointed out how often Trump's messaging relies on the idea that strength is demonstrated through counterattack. The irony is that responding directly to comedians elevates them into opponents rather than background noise. By reacting forcefully to jokes, the campaign can unintentionally confirm their importance and transform a brief punchline into a controversy lasting several days. The attempt to dismiss the humor as irrelevant clashed with the urgency of the responses that followed.
Last week, President Trump hosted multiple events at the Kennedy Center, including an award ceremony for Sylvester Stallone, Gloria Gaynor, and rock band Kiss, as well as a musical performance by the Village People, which raises the question, is Donald Trump a gay man from 1978?
There's an uncomfortable symmetry in watching a movement that once mastered viral outrage struggle when that same viral energy turns comedic. Trump's early dominance on social media demonstrated how effectively he could capture attention. Yet attention is a neutral currency because it does not distinguish between applause and parody. When clips of the comedy segments spread across digital platforms, they traveled along the same networks that once amplified Trump's own posts. The satire suggested that modern political campaigns increasingly resemble media production studios, constantly producing content, shaping reactions, and measuring engagement. Within that framework, Leavitt becomes not just a spokesperson, but a recurring character within a larger narrative. The comedy hinted that once politics adopts the style of episodic storytelling, it must also accept episodic criticism. In the end, the sharpest edge of the roast came from its refusal to treat outrage as something sacred. By portraying indignation as predictable and almost mechanical, the segment challenged the emotional foundation of the campaign's messaging. If outrage can be anticipated, timed, and even parodied before it arrives, then it begins to lose its power. That realization, more than any single joke, helps explain why the reaction felt so intense.